So when you look at the best records in the NBA as well as the highest net ratings, you could be led to believe that the Milwaukee Bucks are the best team in the NBA. And now I'm going to attempt to see if I feel that that is actually the case. So I think the biggest thing with the Bucks in determining whether they can run through the Eastern Conference, get to the finals and all that, is can they get there without a second big-time scorer? I mean, Middleton's putting up 18, and some of that is through the flow of Bud's offense, shooting more threes, spacing, and all that. Some of it is when Middleton goes off the dribble himself. He'll post up occasionally. Sometimes this has gotten him into trouble, as he'll take some bad shots or dribble too much or hoist up some turnaround jumper that does go in more than you think it would, but even then it's still not super efficient, especially when you got Giannis sitting there. And it does seem like sometimes Middleton forgets that he's not the leading shot taker on this team, although it is actually pretty damn close between him and Giannis. So I don't know. I mean, can Middleton be that second scorer? Sure, he did it in round one against the Celtics a year ago, but you could suggest that that was a bit of an aberration, seeing as the dude shot like 60% from the field or something crazy like that. However, one thing that should be mentioned, and I'll talk about the Bucks defense in a moment here, but I think one thing we should remember is, yeah, I say the Bucks may only have one big scorer. A lot of the teams in the East only have one big scorer as well. I mean, it's mainly just Kawhi with the Raptors. The Pacers have Oladipo. The Celtics, as far as this season goes, only have Kyrie, because who knows if Tatum's going to be that guy. Who knows if Hayward's going to get it going. And then with Philly, I mean, they have two big scorers in Jimmy and Embiid, but they're the team that has like the lingering offensive problems right now, where the spacing isn't as good as it could be and all that stuff. So it's not like these other teams have that luxury that the Bucks may not have. So that's something to remember. But to dive back in to the Bucks offense, and when you look at the teams in the East, they have a lot of good wing defenders, right? The Raptors are full of them. The Pacers, they don't have any Oladipo. And outside of him, I wouldn't say there's one wing defender that's really good, but they have a bunch of guys who know what they're doing on top of playing hard, and they have a system that works. The 76ers, of course, with Ben Simmons and Jimmy Butler. And then the Celtics have quite a few as well. So I could see those teams giving Middleton some problems, unless he's going to hit every single jump shot he attempts. Which, I mean, you know, the dude's a good three-point shooter, but I don't think we can just assume that that is going to happen all the time. I guess next you look at Eric Bledsoe, who is the second leading scorer on this team, basically neck and neck with Malcolm Brogdon. Well, the one thing about all those teams in the East is they have multiple good wing defenders, so you can have one of them or one to two of them either helping or double teaming occasionally on Middleton, and then you could still have one guy there for Eric Bledsoe. I mean, I mentioned Simmons and Butler again, also with the Celtics between Marcus Morris, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and all those guys. Al Horford can switch on to dudes. The Raptors, again, have a million of these guys. So Middleton and Bledsoe, while they are good players, I do think they can be held down a bit by just good defensive players, like good one-on-one defenders. Giannis, of course, takes an entire team effort, but I think those two can at least be held accountable. I think a similar thing can be said for Brogdon, who has made progress going off the dribble and beating defenders, but I think until I see him in a playoff setting, I'm not super confident that he can do that consistently. And then Brook Lopez, for all the beautiful spacing that he has created, it could be interesting to see if he goes into the low post a little bit more in a playoff series, because maybe the Bucks will just need that other guy who can really create, because I am a little fearful that the Middletons, Bledsoes, and Brogdons of the world will not have as easy of a time scoring in the playoffs consistently. Not to say that they're going to suck. I mean, I expect those three to still play well, and of course Giannis is going to create a lot for them, but as we know in the postseason, when teams are able to really lock in on your game plan and it's more about matchups and coaching and all that. I mean, Coach Bud's really good, but even so, it does get a little more difficult. Now, if we can talk about Giannis himself, is there any way that teams could make it a little more difficult on him? I don't know. I mean, you need a really particular kind of defender to go at him. someone who's just the right combination of smarts, size, and athleticism. I think if I look through the league, I could picture with the Raptors, like, could Kawhi bother Giannis at times? Sure, but even then there's a pretty big size difference. Pascal Siakam, he can move and he knows how to defend, but is he going to be big enough? OG could be the one guy just because he can devote more of his energy to defense than Giannis, than Kawhi, and OG is a little stronger than he may look. Even with all this being said, it's going to still take a team effort to try to slow down Giannis. I think the Celtics' best bet is probably Al Horford. He did a good job on Ben Simmons, and when he defended Giannis in that round 1 series, I mean, Giannis still went nuts, but I think Horford was able to slow him down maybe 3%. Now, granted, this Bucks team is a lot better than that one, so even then it may not actually be possible. Between Philly, I mean, Embiid is going to be a problem for Giannis scoring around the rim. Jimmy Butler can perhaps make Giannis care about the guy in front of him. And then, of course, it's going to be interesting to see how teams will dare Giannis to shoot jump shots. Do you go under everything? I mean, even then, that's not going to do too much because Bud will have Giannis moving off the ball. He'll have him posting up. And, of course, if Giannis gets ahead of steam in transition, it doesn't really matter what you do at that point. So he's still going to get his numbers, but the question is going to be, can some team, and I should include Indiana in here as well. I mean, they've got Miles Turner, who's been a really good defensive player this year, and Sabonis has at least kept their defense afloat. So whenever those two are in the game to protect the rim on Giannis, and then between Thad Young, who knows what he's doing, and Bogdanovich, who's pretty good, there could be enough big bodies to just make Giannis care, I guess. So if one team can just slow him down 5% and then bother Middleton, Bledsoe, and Brogdon just enough, that could be the difference for these guys, and that's why nowadays, unless you have LeBron, it is kind of a requirement that you have at least one other top, 15 player or so. And by the way, of course, there are other players in this team between Ilyasova, Tony Snell, Pat Connaughton, George Hill, but we all know in the playoffs, the starters' minutes are going to go up and the rotation's going to go down to like 6 or 7, maybe 8 guys, so that's why I'm focusing mainly on the main 5 dudes for this team. Now if we can talk about the other side of the floor. So, in normal Coach Budenholzer fashion, the Bucks are dead last in the league in 3-point attempts allowed, as teams are shooting about 36 threes a game against them. And they're also 29th in three-pointers made allowed. So teams are shooting and making a lot of threes against them. They make up for it because their rim protection is so good and the way they swarm ball handlers and all that. And that can work in the regular season, as it did with Budenholzer's Hawks season after season, but in the postseason, we saw with LeBron's Cavs, they nailed 1,000,000 threes against Coach Bud's Hawks, and of course, LeBron is in the Western Conference now, so they're not going to have that to deal with, and I don't think there's a playmaker in the East who's really that good, compared to LeBron, I should say, in the terms of the perfect combination of scoring and playmaking, so they're not going to get as killed for that. But these teams in the East like shooting threes. The Celtics are towards the top. Kyrie can break down the defense, and they're going to spread the floor out. Philly doesn't love the three-pointer as much, and they've got some spacing problems, so I could picture the Bucks not getting killed against them. But at the same time, if you're going to swarm Ben Simmons, he may be the best passer in the East. So that could be one guy, but at the same time, we've seen Philly, the moment they had to face a smart team that was able to lock in on their game plans in the Celtics, they had problems. So I don't know if they're all the way out of the water on those things yet, between Embiid not having the ball in the low post all the time because he's got to space out for Jimmy Butler. That team does have some lingering problems that could come out in the postseason. And if that's combined with the Bucks' defense being locked in, then they may not be able to score enough points. The Raptors have had a tough shooting year for whatever reason, outside of pretty much Kawhi. CJ Miles isn't making shots. Teams are going to dare Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby to make shots. Lowry's jumper comes and goes. So, depending on just the status quo of the Raptors shooting at that moment, that could be a big difference between the Bucks beating them in a series or losing to them in a series. And the thing with Indiana is, while they're towards the bottom of the league in three-point attempts, they are 5th in the league in three-point percentage. So I do think they have guys who can make outside jumpers between Bogdanovic and Thad Young. If you leave them wide open in the corner, maybe. Miles Turner has been shooting threes a little bit more lately. And even then, I could picture them perhaps swarming off of him if he's spacing up from like 17 feet. Darren Collison, Corey Joseph are making their outside jumpers. Tyreek is making his. Doug McDermott's making his. That could be something the Bucks need to worry about. If they're going to collapse on Oladipo all day, and then you got all these dudes who can make outside jumpers, hey, Indiana could give the Bucks some problems. The other thing that should be said is, our team's going to focus on Brook Lopez a lot. Now, Coach Bud is a smart defensive coach, so I could picture times when they could have Lopez being put into a screen and then somebody else will just run up and set the screen, or defend the screen instead, I should say, and then Brook can just go to the other guy who's now open. Could be little ways to hide him defensively, but even so, I think Brook Lopez at some point is going to be tested if he can defend in space. So, yeah, I mean, the Bucks are really good. Their game plan has been awesome, but I do think in a playoff setting, while they clearly have the best player, there are some questions about the other guys. Can they be attacked? Can they be dared to shoot or run offense sometimes? And is that perhaps going to be their downfall? We'll have to see. My gut feeling, if you force me to pick, is the Raptors or the Celtics are still the two best teams in the East, with probably a little bit of an edge given to Toronto. But the Bucks, look, if the Bucks make the finals, I'm not going to be shocked. So there you go.